Chair. I was one of those who began this debate with some real concern about whether or not the provisions in this bill around liquor licensing would open the door to a liberalisation, sir, of the availability of liquor at the very time that our community is showing great concern about our drinking culture in this country, and is discussing and debating and coming to grips with the recommendations of the Law Commission on alcohol in our society. And I expressed some of these concerns in the first reading debate, and since then have been part of many of the discussions at Select Committee. And I have to say that I have changed my view, sir, on this issue, and I am generally of the view now that I think that the provisions in this bill for liquor licensing for the Rugby World Cup are reasonable, comprehensive, and appropriate, and I support them. Other speakers have pointed out that the provisions in this bill are largely lifted from the Sale of Liquor Act, that they are primarily designed to expedite the granting of licences, and that the fundamentals of the regulatory framework for liquor licensing are reproduced in this bill, and in fact there are one or two improvements. I mean, it's an interesting question whether or not these provisions do amount to a liberalisation, and I guess you could make the case that the intent of this legislation is to allow faster and arguably a much greater volume of liquor outlets being licensed for this very defined period of time. My colleague Trevor Mallard makes the argument that not one extra person is going to get a drink because of this legislation, because there are going to be plenty of liquor outlets anyway. And I'm not sure I entirely go along with that. I think that with 70,000 visitors to Auckland around the Rugby World Cup and many New Zealanders flooding into the city around the big games, the sheer volume of people in Auckland going to the big games, many of whom are going to want to have a drink before and after the games, is going to mean a pretty dramatic expansion in the number of liquor outlets and the number of drinks being sold. The question is, I think, is that, if you accept that amounts to a liberalisation, is that reasonable in the context of the fact that we're putting on this event? And is it reasonable when you balance it against the huge benefits that we hope New Zealand and our communities will get from hosting the Rugby World Cup? And so my view is that I think that, given what I said before about the fact that I think this legislation has been carefully thought through in regards to the liquor licensing, there are a number of controls and safeguards in place. My view is that there is, in fact, a reasonable balance being struck here, and that I don't think that we have too much to be concerned about. I'm pleased that, for instance, sir, there are one or two things around, for instance, a requirement that outlets with a Rugby World Cup liquor licence are required to provide water free of cost for the punters. There are a number of conditions that are set out in Section 73 that will give the members of the authority the tools to actually require a sort of tailored licensing for particular times and places, and I think that's a good thing. Some of those, for instance, are around the hours that liquor can be sold, the days, the supply of low alcohol beverages, the provision of food, the maximum number of patrons. These are all useful provisions, sir. The police under this bill will have extra enforcement powers that aren't available to them under the Sale of Liquor Act. That is also that's useful. I want to echo, just in finishing, sir, Grant Robertson's comments. Again, on this side of the House, we're concerned about the urgency powers.